And the translation of this is the following. One who at the time of death fixes his life there between the eyebrows, and by strength of yoga, with an undeviating mind, engages himself in remembering the Supreme Lord in full devotion, will certainly attain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's a very nice information for all of us to meditate on. Let me say that. Let me say it again. One who at the time of death, by the way, the time of death is not without doubt the most important moment in our life. So here is a explanation of how to successfully think of at the moment of death. One who at the time of death fixes his life there between the eyebrows, and by the strength of yoga, with an undeviating mind, engages himself in remembering the Supreme Lord in full devotion, will certainly attain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In this verse, it is clearly stated that at the time of death, the mind must be fixed in devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Well, this is the gist of everything in this first little lines, little sentence here in the purport. The most important moment in a person's life is the moment of death. It's not the moment of birth, it's the moment of death. And if we can fix our minds in devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead at the moment of death, we have succeeded in this lifetime to attain the highest perfection of life.
That's fine. We can continue.
What?
We can continue.
So, one who at the time of death fixes his life there between the eyebrows, and by the strength of yoga, with an undeviating mind, engages himself in remembering the Supreme Lord in full devotion, will certainly attain to the Supreme Personality of God. So this is a type of mystic meditation to shut out all mundane things and fix the mind on Krishna. Not only at the moment of death, but throughout life. Otherwise, you will not be able to do it at the moment of death. This has to be practiced every moment of life, so that at the moment of death, we are already practiced to remember Krishna and nothing else. In this verse, it is clearly stated that at the time of death, the mind must be fixed in devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For those practiced in yoga, it is recommended that they raise the life force between the eyebrows to the Ajna chakra. The practice of Sat Chakra Yoga, involving meditation on the 6 chakras, is suggested here. However, a pure devotee does not practice such yoga. Okay. But because he is always engaged in Krishna consciousness, at death, he can remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead by His grace, meaning Krishna's mercy. This is explained in verse 14. Well, we're reading right now, verse number 10. The particular use of the word yoga balena is significant in this verse because without practice of yoga, whether Sattva Chakra Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, one cannot come to this transcendental state of being at the time of death. One cannot suddenly remember the Supreme Lord at death. One must have practiced some yoga system. Well, the best yoga system is chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna
Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna
Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare.
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Ram,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Ram,
Rama
Ram
Rama,
Ram,
Hare
Hare
Hare.
Hare.
So one must have practiced some yoga system, especially the system of bhakti yoga. Since one's mind at death is very disturbed, one should practice transcendence through yoga during one's life. So, what does through yoga mean? Through chanting Hare Krishna. That's what it is, basically. So, unless we're practiced to always chant Hare Krishna every day and as much as we can throughout the day, we'll not be able to remember Krishna at the moment of death. Practice makes perfect. So this Krishna consciousness practice of chanting Hare Krishna is Lord Chaitanya's mercy. He's made it very easy to attain liberation from the cycle of birth and death. Otherwise, we would have to follow the traditional process of Sat Chakra Yoga, involving meditation in the six chakras. Is suggested. A pure devotee does not practice such yoga. Okay, so we're not going to follow the traditional process. We're going to follow the process given by Lord Chaitanya, who simplified the whole process of how to remember Krishna at the moment of death and go back to Godhead. A pure devotee does not practice such yoga, such as the meditation on the six chakras. A pure devotee does not practice such yoga, but because he is always engaged in Krishna consciousness, at death, he can remember the Supreme Personality Godhead by his grace. Okay? Practice makes perfect. And if you're in Krishna consciousness, you don't have to perform all these difficult yogic processes. You simply have to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare throughout your life. But because he's always engaged in Krishna consciousness, meaning always chanting Hare Krishna, at death he can remember the Supreme Personality Godhead by his grace, by Krishna's mercy. This is explained in verse 14. The particular use of the word yoga balena is significant in this verse because without practice of yoga, whether Sat Chakra Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, one cannot come to this transcendental state of being at the time of death. One cannot suddenly remember the Supreme Lord at death. One must have practiced some yoga system, especially the system of Bhakti Yoga. Since one's mind at death is very disturbed, one should practice transcendence through yoga during one's life. Well, whenever it's using this word yoga, it means Krishna consciousness. And what is Krishna consciousness? It's always remembering Krishna, always serving Krishna, always engaging in devotional service to Krishna, always having Krishna prasadam, always associating with devotees, etc. So the moment of death is the most important moment of life. The moment when we're going to die is the most important moment of our life. If we can remember Krishna at the moment of death, we go back to Godhead. But you would have to practice chanting Hare Krishna throughout your life to be able to remember Krishna at the moment of death. It's not that, oh, well, I'll do all types of nonsense throughout life, and at the moment of death, I'll remember Krishna and go back to Godhead. No, it's not going to work like that. Why? Because at the moment of death, everything we've done in our life flashes through our mind. And if most of what we did throughout our life is nonsense, well, that's what we're going to meditate on. And we will not be able to remember Krishna. But if throughout our life we've always been engaged in Krishna consciousness, chanting, dancing, feasting, etc., to glorify the Lord, then who are we going to remember? We're going to remember Krishna. We're going to not remember all the nonsense that is taking place in the world. So, this verse today is verse number 11, right?
10. 10, we just completed. 10.
We just completed 10, yeah. So, number 11. Yad aksharam veda vido vadanti. Vishanti yat yatayo vitaraga. Yad icchanto brahmacharyam charanti. Tate padam sangrahena pravaksye. Persons who are learned in the Vedas, who utter Omkara, and who are great sages in the renounced order, enter into Brahman. Desiring such perfection, one practices celibacy. I shall now briefly explain to you this process by which one may attain salvation. Okay, well, this is Lord Krishna speaking to Arjuna. And he's going to explain to him how one can attain liberation from the cycle of birth and death. And one important principle in order to be qualified for going back to Godhead is practice of celibacy. That means no sex. One can have sex for procreation only, but beyond that, one should not have any type of sex because that will contaminate us. And once one has children, that's the end of having any sex. So how many children are we going to have? 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, maybe 5. But then it should end. And the rest of our life, we should be engaged in devotional service by the practice of celibacy. So Krishna says, desiring such perfection, one practices celibacy. I shall now briefly explain to you this process by which one may attain salvation. So, unless we're able to practice celibacy, we will not be able to advance in Krishna consciousness. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. This is chapter 8, text number 11. Purport. Lord Shri Krishna has recommended to Arjuna the practice of Sat Chakra Yoga, in which one places the air of life between the eyebrows. Taking it for granted that Arjuna might not know how to practice Sat Chakra Yoga, the Lord explains the process in the following verses. The Lord says that Brahman, although one without a second, has various manifestations and features, especially for the impersonals. The Akshara or Omkara, the syllable Om, is identical with Brahman. Krishna here explains the impersonal Brahman, in which the renounced order of sages enter. In the Vedic system of knowledge, students from the very beginning are taught to vibrate Om and learn of the ultimate impersonal Brahman by living with the spiritual master in complete celibacy. In this way, they realize two of Brahman's features. This practice is very essential for the student's advancement in spiritual life. But at the moment, such brahmachari, unmarried celibate life is not at all possible. The social construction of the world has changed so much that there's no possibility of one's practicing celibacy from the beginning of student life. Throughout the world, there are many institutions for different departments of knowledge, but there is no recognized institution where the students can be educated in the brahmachari principles. Unless one practices celibacy, advancement in spiritual life is very difficult. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya has announced, according to the scriptural injunctions for this age of Kali, that in this age, no process of realizing the Supreme is possible except the chanting of the holy names of Lord Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Well, there it is, my dear devotees. This is ultimate knowledge of how to make, let's say, real spiritual advancement in the age of Kali Yuga. It's by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra continually, non-stop in one's life. Now, some people say, no, well, there's this, in the Shastras it says this. Well, Prabhupada explains what the Shastras say, but we have to follow what Lord Chaitanya said for this age of Kali Yuga. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya has announced, according to the scriptural injunctions for this age of Kali, that in this age, no process of realizing the Supreme is possible except the chanting of the holy names of Lord Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now, what did Haridas Thakur do? He was born a Muslim, but he began to follow Lord Chaitanya. And how did he follow Lord Chaitanya? By always chanting Hare Krishna. And he would chant at least 23 and a half hours a day, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. He only gave himself a half an hour to bathe and to take care of his body and maybe eat something. And that was it. The rest of the time, 23 and a half hours, he was chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Now, we can't emulate Haridas Thakur, but we can follow in his footsteps by regulated devotional service to Lord Krishna and giving up illicit sex, gambling, meat eating, intoxication, and gambling. So if we give up sinful activities and take up spiritual activities, chanting Hare Krishna, eating only Krishna Prasadam, associating with devotees, and going on Harinam Sankirtan, we can have a spiritual life that's not only fun, but easy to follow. We don't have to have that severe renunciation. We renunciate in a pleasant, happy way by following Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and eating prasadam, associating with devotees, and going to Sankirtan, and hearing lectures given by devotees, etc. So, although there is this severe yoga that people were trying to follow in the previous lifetime, in this lifetime, in this time, by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, becoming Krishna conscious is not this very, very severe renunciation. One is renounced by chanting, dancing, and feasting in Krishna consciousness. Okay, so our takeaway here from chapter 8, verse number 11 is the following. Unless one practices celibacy, advancement in spiritual life is very difficult. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya has announced, according to the scriptural injunctions in this age of Kali, that in this age, no process of realizing the Supreme is possible except the chanting of the holy names of Lord Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Well, someone may argue, oh, no, that's not the recommended way. We have to do this yoga practice, that yoga practice, and so-called these different, what you would call, uh, practices of yoga. No, Lord Chaitanya has announced, according to the scriptural injunctions for the days of Kali, that in this age, no process of realizing the Supreme is possible except the chanting of the holy names of Lord Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Well, this eliminates all the so-called yoga processes that people are doing today. Instead of wasting our time on twisting our body like a pretzel and meditating on Omkara and so forth, we dance, chant, feast, and hear lectures about Krishna in ecstasy. And in that way, we make spiritual advancement. Text number 12. Sarvadara dvarani samyamya manohridi nirudyacha murdani adpaya mana pranam astito yoga dharanam. The yogic situation is that of detachment from all sensual engagements, closing all the doors to senses and fixing the mind and the heart and the life there at the top of the head. One establishes himself in yoga. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. To practice yoga, as suggested here, one first has to close the doors of all sense enjoyment. This practice is called pratyahara, or withdrawing the senses from sense objects. The sense organs for acquiring knowledge, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and touch, should be fully controlled and should not be allowed to engage in self-gratification. In this way, the mind focuses on the supersoul in the heart, and the life force is raised to the top of the head. In the 6th chapter, this process is described in detail. But, as mentioned before, this practice is not practical in this age. Here it is. But, as mentioned before, this practice is not practical in this age. The best process is Krishna consciousness. If one is always able to fix his mind on Krishna in devotional service, it is very easy for him to remain in an undisturbed transcendental trance or in samadhi. Well, here, samadhi means always remembering Krishna. And how can you always remember Krishna? By chanting the Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
So the traditionalists will say, no, you have to do this, you have to do that. No, all you have to do is chant Hare Krishna continually, like Haridas Thakur, and associate with devotees, and have nice prasadam, and bathe regularly, and go on Harinam Sankirtan, and preach Krishna consciousness. Then you will have a very simple and direct connection to Krishna. Otherwise, if you want to close all the doors of the senses and fix the mind on the heart and the life there at the top of the head to establish oneself in yoga, well, who's going to do that? Very few people will be able to do that. The practice, to practice yoga as suggested here, it's in chapter 8, verse number 12. One first has to close the doors of all sense enjoyment. Right there, that eliminates everybody. Very few people can close the doors of all sense enjoyment. This practice is called pratyahara, or withdrawing the senses from the sense objects. The sense organs for acquiring knowledge, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and touch, should be fully controlled and should not be allowed to engage in self-gratification. In this way, the mind focuses on the super soul in the heart, and the life force is raised to the top of the head. In the 6th chapter, this process is described in detail. But as mentioned before, this practice is not practical in this age. The best process is Krishna consciousness. If one is always able to fix his mind on Krishna in devotional service, it is very easy for him to remain in an undisturbed transcendental trance or in samadhi. Okay, well, here it's highly recommended to be engaged in Krishna consciousness. That means always chanting Hare Krishna, associating with devotees, etc. You don't have to do all this difficult yoga exercises that was done previously. Now our yoga is called Hare Krishna Mahamantra and Hare Krishna Sankirtan. That is our tapasya. But that tapasya, Krishna conscious tapasya, is joyful. The best process is Krishna consciousness. The practice detailed about the traditional way is not practical in this age. The best process is Krishna consciousness. If one is always able to fix his mind on Krishna in devotional service, it is very easy for him to remain in an undisturbed transcendental trance or in samadhi. So you don't have to do all these difficult yogic practices. You simply have to be a sincere devotee, always engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. That is the best process, Krishna consciousness. If one is able to fix his mind on Krishna in devotional service, that means being engaged in devotional service, serving Krishna with love and devotion, it is very easy for him to remain in an undisturbed transcendental trance or in samadhi. There it is, my dear devotees. This is the recommended process in Kali Yuga of how to make spiritual advancement and go back to Godhead. Okay, I'm just going to read one more verse and we'll stop there. After being situated in this yoga practice and vibrating the sacred syllable Om, the supreme combination of letters, if one thinks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and quits his body, he will certainly reach the spiritual planets. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is clearly stated here that Om, Brahman, and Lord Krishna are not different. The impersonal sound of Krishna is Om, but the sound Hare Krishna contains Om. The chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is clearly recommended for this stage. So, if one quits his body at the end of life chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, he certainly reaches one of the spiritual planets according to the mode of his practice. The devotees of Krishna enter the Krishna planet, Goloka Vrindavan. For the personalists, there are also innumerable other planets known as the Vaikuntha planets in the spiritual sky, whereas the impersonalists remain in the Brahmajyoti. So there it is. Just chant Hare Krishna right up to the end of life, and certainly one reaches the spiritual planets according to the mode of his practice. The devotees of Krishna enter the Krishna planet, the Loka Vrindavan. Okay? There is, for the personalists, there are also innumerable other planets known as Vaikuntha planets in the spiritual sky. And whereas for the impersonalists, they remain in the Brahma Jyoti, which means that they will eventually fall down. But the devotees don't fall down because if one quits his body at the end of life chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, he certainly reaches one of the spiritual planets according to the mode of his practice. So that should be our culture, our way of engaging in Krishna consciousness. Always chanting Hare Krishna right up to the moment of death. If we don't practice this Hare Krishna Mahamantra during our life, we will not be able to remember it at the moment of death. We'll remember all other things that we do. But if our main, let's say, preoccupation throughout life is devotional service and chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra, then it easily will remember Krishna at the moment of death and go back to Godhead for eternal life. And that's therefore in this purport it says the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is clearly recommended for this age. So if one quits his body at the end of life chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, he certainly reaches one of the spiritual planets according to the mode of his practice. The devotees of Krishna enter the Krishna planet, Goloka Vrindavan. For the personalists, there are also innumerable other planets known as Vaikuntha planets. In the spiritual sky, whereas the impersonalists remain in the Brahma Jyoti, and that means that they will eventually fall down again. But not the sincere devotees who chant Hare Krishna throughout life and remember Krishna at the moment of death. So thank you very much, my dear devotees. This is our takeaway today. Please chant Hare Krishna and be happy. If you have a little bit of time, come tonight at 8 o'clock where we'll be chanting. Guess what?
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Singing and dancing tonight.
Hare
All glory
to Srila Prabhupada ki.